In a town like Haven Ridge, your name is all you have. My name is Leah Monroe. My family is Haven Ridge, the beloved, perfect Monroes. I was the good daughter, the responsible one, the infrastructure everyone took for granted. Then a late-night fraud alert lit up my phone. A $48,000 loan I never signed. My credit, my future, my entire reputation. All stolen. The worst part. The paper trail led straight back to my father and my golden boy brother. How do you expose a lie when the lie is your entire family? Like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel. We always appreciate the time you spent here with us. My name is Leah Monroe. I live in Haven Ridge, a town built on casseroles and high school football. It's the kind of place where neighbors helping neighbors isn't just a motto on the welcome sign. It's a social contract enforced through church potlucks and shared lawnmowers. I'm what you'd call a rule follower. At 28, I work as a junior financial analyst at the local credit union. My life is practical. I am conflict avoidant. I'm still in a modest rental on Elm Street, brown bagging my lunch and tracking every dollar in a spreadsheet, meticulously saving for a down payment. I'm proud of doing things the right way. I don't take shortcuts. In Haven Ridge, your name is everything, and the Monroe name is practically royalty. My family's business, Monroe Home Supply, is the anchor of Main Street, a decades-old institution. My father, Tom Monroe, is the patriarch of both the store and in many ways the town. He's a pillar of the community, charismatic, beloved, public-spirited. He's the guy who sponsors the Little League team and quietly covers the bill for a family whose furnace breaks in winter. My mother, Ellen, is the perfect counterpart. She's the gracious hostess, the head of the church hospitality committee, the organizer of every charity drive. She operates on a fuel of social grace and a deep abiding terror of what the neighbors might think. Their public image is spotless. Perfect. Then there's my older brother, Dylan. He's in his early 30s, perpetually charming and pathologically impulsive. He's the entrepreneurial one, the golden child. Dylan has a new vision every 6 months, a craft brewery, an app for local artisans, a bespoke woodworking shop that mysteriously burned down right after the insurance policy was updated. They all fail quietly. And my father, Tom, always bails him out quietly. Dylan is the dreamer, the future of the Monroe legacy. I'm the responsible one. I'm the infrastructure. I'm the one who spends my weekends at the store not charming customers, but in the back office running spreadsheets for Dad, handling the bookkeeping, and quietly untangling Dylan's financial messes before they become public knowledge. I'm the support beam everyone leans on, the one nobody notices until the whole house starts to creak. I'm rarely praised, just expected. I love my family, I really do. But sometimes I feel completely invisible. That feeling was stronger than ever last Sunday. We were at my parents' house for our weekly family dinner, roast chicken and reputation management. The air was thick with excitement. My father and Dylan were practically glowing, interrupting each other to gush about the Ridge Renewal Project. It was Dylan's latest grand idea, a community revitalization fund to restore the historic downtown, to bring Haven Ridge into the future. They tossed around big words like community equity, local investors, and shared prosperity. My mother just beamed, patting Dylan's arm. "Isn't it wonderful, Leah?" she urged, not really asking. "You should be so happy for your brother. He's going to save this town." My father raised his glass of iced tea, his voice booming with the pride he usually reserved for a record sales quarter. To Dylan, he said, "Our visionary." I smiled and nodded, playing my part, the responsible, supportive daughter. The project sounded big and vague, maybe too big and too vague for Dylan given his track record, but I kept my mouth shut. Later, as I was gathering my coat to leave, Dylan pulled me aside in the hallway, draping an arm over my shoulder, his charm dialed up to high. "Hey, Leah," he started, his voice lowered to a conspiratorial whisper. "There might be a small favor I need from you down the line. Just something to help secure some bridge capital." He glanced away, then back, smiling that disarming smile that always worked on Dad. "You've just got such spotless credit, you know. It would really help move things along with the big partners." I must have hesitated, because he immediately waved his hand, laughing it off as if it were nothing. It's no big deal. Seriously, just paperwork. Just to show the institutional lenders we've got solid local buy-in. A small, cold knot of unease tightened in my stomach. Paperwork, I asked. Yeah, just dotting I's and crossing T's, he said, already turning away. Don't worry your practical little head about it. I wanted to be supportive. I wanted just once to be part of the vision instead of the cleanup crew. So I pushed the feeling down. I nodded. Sure, Dylan. Just let me know what you need. That was Sunday. Now it's Tuesday night. I'm exhausted from running year-end reports at the credit union. I'm in my pajamas scrolling through my phone, drifting off to sleep. My little rental house is quiet. I'm thinking about my savings account, calculating how many more months until I can finally make an offer on that little Cape Cod by the park. My phone buzzes on the nightstand. I ignore it. It buzzes again, a priority notification. I groggily pick it up, annoyed. It's an email from my credit monitoring app. The subject line just says fraud alert. My stomach tightens instantly. I sit bolt upright, my sleepiness vanishing, replaced by a cold, metallic dread. I unlock the phone and open the app. My heart hammers against my ribs as the alert loads. I stare at the screen, and I freeze. The words are there, printed in stark digital black and white, but they don't make any sense. A new account, an unsecured business loan, a balance of $48,500, and a red flag next to it, past due. I stop breathing. The room tilted. My heart didn't just race. It slammed against my ribs, a frantic bird in a cage. $48,500. The numbers swam blurry and unreal. Tunnel vision clamped down, blurring the edges of my bedroom, the only sound the roar of blood in my ears. I scrambled out of bed, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I logged directly into the credit union's main portal, the one I used for work, and pulled my full report. My score, my meticulous, hard-earned perfect score, had cratered. It had dropped over 80 points. The dream of the little Cape Cod, the down payment I was so close to, didn't just feel distant. It felt like it had been incinerated. This couldn't be real. It was a mistake. A clerical error. I fumbled through the alert, found the lender's name, a high-interest business capital firm I'd never heard of, and dialed their 24-hour hotline, my teeth chattering. A bored-sounding woman answered. I stammered out my name, my social security number, my voice sounding thin and high. Yes, Ms. Monroe, the woman said flatly, her keyboard clacking. We show an unsecured business loan for $48,500 finalized 6 weeks ago. It is currently 31 days past due. I never signed that, I whispered. I never applied for that. A sigh on the other end. Ma'am, we show a completed application package. The loan is tied to an LLC. Let's see, the Ridge Renewal Project. My blood ran cold. We have an electronic document packet executed with your signature and social security number, she continued, unmoved. If you believe this is fraud, you'll need to file a police report and submit it to our investigations department. I hung up the phone. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I drove straight to Monroe Home Supply, my panic congealing into a cold, hard knot of dread. I bypassed the registers, the smell of sawdust and fertilizer, and pushed open the back office door without knocking. Dylan and my father were hunched over a set of blueprints, laughing about something. They looked up, their smiles freezing when they saw my face. Leah. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost, Dad said, his folksy charm clicking into place. $48,500, I said, my voice shaking, from a capital firm. For the Ridge Renewal Project. In my name. Dylan's face went slack, but he recovered quickly, shifting his eyes to our father before plastering on that familiar, placating smile. Oh, that, he said, letting out a little laugh. Leah, you scared me. I thought it was something serious. He stepped forward, putting a hand on my arm. I flinched away. Dylan, what did you do? Look. I might have used your information to get the ball rolling. he admitted, his tone infuriatingly casual, as if he'd borrowed my car without asking. But you said you wanted to be part of the project. This is just how these things work. It's temporary, Leah. It'll be off your credit in no time. The first investor checks are about to clear. I looked at my father expecting, I don't know. Outraged shock. He just sighed, rubbing the back of his neck, looking annoyed. Leah, this is family, Tom Monroe said, his voice taking on the pillar of the community tone. We help each other. This project is for all of us. It's for the town. You'll get it all back with interest, for goodness sake, when the project takes off. I never signed anything, I said, my voice rising. That is identity theft. It's fraud. Don't be so dramatic. Dylan snapped, his charm vanishing. He riffled through a stack of papers on his cluttered desk and pulled one out, shoving it at me. It was a signature page, and there at the bottom was my name. It looked like mine. See? Dylan said, pointing. You probably forgot. Remember that day we were rushing for the bank deadline? You were here, you saw the documents. You signed it. I stared at the paper, my mind racing. I was here. I did run some numbers for him, but I never signed a loan application. I know I didn't. Just as I opened my mouth to argue, the office door opened and my mother breezed in, carrying a tray with 3 coffee mugs. Here we are, she chimed, then stopped, sensing the tension. What's going on, Leah, honey? What's wrong? Leah's overreacting about the renewal loan, Dylan said, rolling his eyes. She's being dramatic. My mother's face instantly hardened. She set the tray down with a sharp click. Leah Monroe, your brother and your father are working themselves to the bone for this family, for this town, and you're going to come in here with this negativity. You could hurt the project. You could hurt our reputation. I was suffocating. They were all looking at me not as a victim but as a problem. The responsible one was finally breaking, and they didn't like it. The panic faded, replaced by a sharp, cold clarity. I was infrastructure and I was broken. I want a full copy, I said, my voice low and steady. They all stared. I want a full copy of every single document that has my name on it. The loan, the application, all of it. And I want a repayment plan. In writing, showing exactly when and how that $48 and $500 is being paid off before it hits my credit again. My father bristled, his face flushing dark red. He was offended. I'll be damned, he seethed, if I'm going to be treated like some stranger off the street by my own daughter in my own store. Get me the papers, I repeated. He stared me down, this man I had only ever wanted to please. He saw something new in my eyes. After a long, tense silence, he jerked his chin at Dylan. Get her the papers. I drove home, the copied documents heavy and toxic on my passenger seat. I felt stunned, hurt, and utterly alone. That night, I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a signature that looked like mine, but felt like a betrayal, when my phone buzzed again. Another automated alert, this time from my personal savings account at my own credit union. An attempted withdrawal of $5,000 was flagged as suspicious and has been blocked. I scrolled down, my blood turning to ice. The withdrawal was attempted by a third party authorized by a recently filed power of attorney. A power of attorney I had never seen, never heard of, and never ever granted. I whispered it into the empty room. What did you do, Dylan? I didn't call in sick. I went to work. The exhaustion was a physical weight, a heavy cloak I dragged with me through the credit union doors, but underneath it a cold, sharp anger was beginning to burn. The victim was fading, and the analyst was taking over. I nodded to my boss, grabbed my coffee, and sat down. My family thought I was just the dependable, quiet bookkeeper. They forgot where I worked. They forgot what I was good at. I waited until the morning rush of deposits and loan inquiries subsided. Then I opened the databases, not our customer-facing ones, but the deep back-end systems we used for underwriting and legal compliance. Discreetly, my heart hammering with a new kind of fear, the fear of getting caught breaking protocol, I ran a search on Ridge Renewal Project LLC. The results loaded instantly. Registered Agent Dylan Monroe. Of course. But it was the principal address that made my stomach clench. It wasn't Monroe Home Supply, it was a rented mailbox at the strip mall post office. I pulled the county clerk's files. The LLC was less than a year old, filed just 3 weeks before Dylan had first mentioned his vision at Sunday dinner. This wasn't a long gestating community project. It was a shell created for a purpose. My hands were shaking. I needed a second pair of eyes, someone who wasn't a Monroe. Marisol Vega, one of our senior loan officers, had her office 3 doors down. Marisol was sharp, no nonsense, and had seen every scam in the book. I caught her between appointments, shut the door, and in a low, terrified whisper, I laid out the basics: the loan, the POA, the signature. I didn't say my brother. I said a family member. Marisol didn't judge. She just listened, her expression hardening. "Stay late tonight," she said, her voice quiet. "After the branch closes. Bring everything you have. We'll look at your personal accounts on the back end where no one can see the access logs." That evening, under the sterile hum of the after-hours lighting, Marisol and I dug in. She pulled up my account history, and we found it. A joint family emergency fund savings account, opened by my father years ago, one I thought was dormant, holding only a few $100s. It wasn't dormant. For the last 6 months, there had been a series of small, steady transfers, $500 here, $1,000 there, all moving into the Ridge Renewal Project's new business account. "He's been bleeding you dry for months," Marisol murmured. Then she pulled up the digital signature on the power of attorney paperwork. She toggled back to the $48 $500 loan document. She zoomed in, comparing them pixel by pixel. "Look," she said, pointing. "The L in Leah, the downstroke on the M. They're not just similar, Leah. They are identical, not human identical, but digital identical." She was right. It was a copy-paste, a forgery, clean and simple. My own signature, likely lifted from a tax form I'd filed for the store, had been weaponized against me. The next day, I felt numb, like I was moving through a fog. I went to the diner for lunch, needing to get out of the office. I was just picking at a sandwich when a voice chirped my name. "Leah. Leah Monroe, dear." It was Mrs. Green, my old babysitter, a widow in her 70s, who lived on a fixed income. Her face was lit up with a huge smile. "Oh, Leah, I'm just so proud of you," she gushed, clutching my hand. "What you and Dylan are doing for Haven Ridge, it's just a blessing. My Henry, God rest his soul, he always loved this town." I tried to smile, but my face felt stiff. "Thank you, Mrs. Green. We're trying." "Oh, more than trying," she said, digging in her purse. "I was so thrilled to finally put Henry's insurance payout to good use, not just letting it sit in some CD, and to know you're managing it." She pulled out a glossy, folded brochure. It was professionally printed with the Ridge Renewal Project logo on the front. She unfolded it to show me an investor statement. And my blood evaporated. My name was at the bottom, printed in elegant script above a title I had never held: Leah Monroe, Financial Advisor. "See?" she said, pointing proudly. "Dylan said you were the brains making sure it was all safe." I stared at my name at the official-looking statement promising an 8% annual return, and I felt physically ill. This wasn't just about my credit. This wasn't just about a family squabble. They hadn't just stolen from me. They had stolen me. They had stolen my name, my professional reputation, and used it to lure in the most vulnerable people in our town. Mrs. Green, who saved every coupon, had given them her husband's life insurance. I couldn't breathe. I managed to say something, I don't even know what, and fled the diner. That night, my kitchen table looked like a war room. I spread everything out: the forged $48 $500 loan, the fake investor statement with my name on it, the LLC filings with the mailbox address. My mind was finally connecting the dates. The LLC was formed. A week later, a new commercial line of credit was opened on Monroe Home Supply. I remembered seeing the paperwork on Dad's desk and assuming it was for spring inventory. 2 days later, the $48 $500 loan was funded in my name. Then the withdrawals from Mrs. Green's account matching the dates of the small transfers out of the family emergency fund. It was a shell game. They were using my good credit and the store's assets to fund the project, and using the project to attract investor money like Mrs. Green's to what, pay off the loans, or something else. The knot of unease from that first Sunday dinner was now a screaming alarm. This was bigger than Dylan's usual incompetence. This was calculated. This was criminal. My hands were shaking as I picked up my phone to call Marisol again, but before I could dial, a message lit up the screen. It was from an unknown number. If you care about the people in this town, stop asking questions. This isn't just a family matter anymore. The text message from the unknown number confirmed it. This was no longer a family problem I could quietly fix. This was a threat. My hands were steady as I drove to my parents' house, the folder of evidence a cold, hard square on the passenger seat. I didn't care about the risk anymore. I only cared about the truth. I found them in the living room, the television murmuring in the background. They were trying to pretend it was a normal evening. The sight of their comfortable, unbothered life sent a spike of pure ice through my veins. "Turn it off," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. My mother Ellen startled, her hand flying to her chest. "Leah, you scared me half to death. What is it?" Tom looked up from his newspaper, his patient father mask clicking into place. "Leah, this isn't a good time. Your mother and I don't care," I said. I walked to the heavy oak coffee table and laid the folder down. I opened it. One by one, I placed the documents in a row. The forged loan agreement, the fraudulent power of attorney, the bank statements showing the slow drain from our joint account. And last, I put down Mrs. Green's glossy fake investor statement with my name printed on it like a brand. "Explain this," I demanded. Dylan, who had been hovering in the doorway, scoffed. "Leah, we went over this. It's just paperwork." "Leah Monroe, financial advisor." I read, my voice shaking with a rage I didn't know I possessed. "Who authorized this, Dylan? Who built this?" I looked at my father. For the first time in my life, I saw his mask crack. The beloved community pillar, the charismatic salesman, it all fell away. He stared at Mrs. Green's statement, and his face went pale. He looked genuinely, deeply rattled. "Where is the money going?" I asked, my voice deadly quiet. "It's not in the project account. I checked the balances before I left work. It's almost empty. Where is Mrs. Green's money?" Dylan started to stammer, backing up, looking to Dad for help. But Dad was silent, his eyes fixed on the paper. "Where is it, Dylan?" I shouted. "You want to know?" Dylan finally snapped, his voice cracking. "You really want to know? Fine. It's gone. All of it." My mother let out a small sob. "Gone where?" I pressed. It's not a project." Dylan confessed, the words tumbling out in a desperate rush. I got into some trouble. Sports betting, online stuff. It started small, I thought I could control it, but I kept losing. I was just chasing the losses, Leah, trying to get it back." He was crying now, a pathetic gasping sound. "I thought Ridge Renewal could be the funnel. Get some real capital, make one big score, and pay everyone back before they even knew it was gone." He sank onto the sofa, burying his head in his hands. "But it's not just the banks," he whispered, his voice muffled. "I'm in deep. To private lenders. Guys who don't care about legalities, Leah. They don't file paperwork. They send messages." The anonymous text. My blood ran cold. I turned to my parents. They weren't shocked. They were just sad. Defeated. "You knew," I whispered. "You knew." "We knew he was in some trouble." Tom finally said, his voice heavy. He wouldn't look at me. He just stared at his hands. "We didn't know how bad. I swear. I thought this project was real. I thought if we could just get one big win, it would make everything right. It would fix him." "And you," I said, turning to my mother, who was silently weeping. "I was protecting this family," she cried, her voice rising with hysteria. I was protecting our name. Do you have any idea what would happen if this town found out? If they knew your brother? If they thought your father? We would be ruined. We were protecting you. Protecting me. I was incredulous. You used me. I pointed to the papers. You used my name, my credit, my reputation. Then the real question, the one that had been sitting like a stone in my gut, rose to the surface. Mrs. Green, I said, my voice hardening. Did you know, when you let her put her late husband's insurance payout into this funnel? Did you know it was failing? My father flinched. He looked up, his eyes filled with a desperate pleading shame. And he said nothing. His silence was the loudest confession in the room. It was the answer to everything. This isn't a rough patch, I said, the cold clarity of it all settling over me. This isn't a mistake. This is fraud. This is theft. This is elder abuse. You watch your tone, young lady. Tom snapped, his fear turning to anger. You go public with this, you'll destroy everything we've built. You'll destroy this family. You'll ruin your own last name. Leah, please. Ellen sobbed, grabbing my arm. He's your brother. Your brother. You can't send your own brother to prison. You just can't. It would kill him. It would kill your father. Dylan, seeing them defend him, lifted his head, his face blotchy and mean. She wants this, he spat. She's always been jealous. She always wanted to see me fail. Go on, Leah. Be the hero. You're so self-righteous. Go on and burn it all down. I looked at the three of them, the visionary, the pillar, the hostess. A family built on lies and reputation. I pulled my arm from my mother's grasp. I picked up my folder, leaving the copies on the table. I can't be the fixer anymore, I said, my voice hollow. I walked out of the house, their shouts and sobs following me into the driveway. I got into my car, my body finally succumbing, shaking so hard I couldn't put the key in the ignition. I was crying not for them, but for the family I thought I had. The loyalty I had given them was a one-way street. My responsibility wasn't to their legacy. It was to Mrs. Green. It was to the town. As I sat there trying to catch my breath, my phone buzzed on the console. A new notification. A voicemail. I tapped it, my thumb unsteady. A man's voice, folksy and familiar, filled the car. Leah, Chief Daniels here. Hey, I'm an old friend of your dad's. Listen, I heard a little rumor you're stirring up some trouble about that Ridge renewal thing. Why don't you come by the station tomorrow? We can just chat. Informally. Get this all straightened out. His tone was friendly, but the message underneath was crystal clear. It wasn't an invitation. It was a warning. Chief Daniels' informal chat was a threat, plain and simple. Tom was calling in his favors. The local police were compromised. I was completely on my own. I drove not home but to Marisol's house, my hands shaking on the wheel. I showed her the text, played her the voicemail. Her face went grim. You can't go to Daniels, she said. He'll bury it. This is bigger than Haven Ridge. You need to go to the state. She helped me find the number, the state attorney general's financial crimes hotline. I made the call from her living room, my voice a low, unsteady whisper as I detailed my own name, my father's, my brother's, and the Ridge Renewal Project. I felt like a traitor. I felt like I was planting a bomb in my own life, but I gave them everything. The call back came the next day. A woman with a crisp, professional voice, Agent Parker. She didn't want to meet at my house or the police station. She wanted to meet at the credit union after hours. That night, the branch felt huge and empty. Agent Parker was waiting by the vault. She was sharp, all business, and radiated an authority that made my skin prickle. We sat in the conference room, and for the second time I laid out the contents of my folder. The forged loan, the fake power of attorney, Mrs. Green's statement, the LLC documents. I watched her face as she examined each one. She was clinical, her expression unreadable. This is thorough, she said finally. She looked up, her eyes locking on mine. Ms. Monroe, what you're showing me here isn't just a family dispute. This is likely securities fraud, wire fraud, and potential elder financial abuse. We've actually already had another complaint filed from a local resident who grew suspicious. Your evidence connects all the dots. My breath hitched. Another complaint. I wasn't the only one. Will you cooperate? She asked. Formally, we can offer you protection as a cooperating witness. This was the moment, the point of no return. I looked at the evidence of my family's crime spread out on the polished table. Yes, I said. 3 days later, posters went up all over town. Flyers appeared in mailboxes. The Monroe family was hosting a community update night at the high school gym. Setting the record straight, the headline read, Come hear the truth about the Ridge Renewal Project. I knew what it was. It was damage control. They'd heard the rumors I was stirring up, and they were going to get ahead of it, paint me as the problem, the overreacting daughter. Agent Parker called me as soon as she saw a copy. This is their move, Leah, she said. They're going to try to charm the town and discredit you before you can talk. We can't let that happen. We'll be there. Will you speak if we back you up? My stomach felt like it was full of wet cement. To stand up in front of everyone I had ever known and accuse my own father and brother, yes, I whispered. I'll be there. The gym was packed. It was all of Haven Ridge. Every pew sitter, every small business owner, every old friend of my parents. The air was thick with nervous energy gossip and a desperate collective wanting to believe. My father took the stage first, the Tom Monroe everyone knew and loved. He was magnificent. He spoke of vicious rumors, of personal attacks on our family, of keeping faith in the face of adversity. He spoke of his love for Haven Ridge, his voice cracking with emotion. The crowd softened. They were on his side. Then Dylan took the mic. He was emotional, vulnerable, the prodigal son. He framed himself as a misunderstood visionary, someone who had tried too hard, who had perhaps made a few small errors in paperwork, in his passion to save the town. The applause started swelling through the gym. They were eating it up. In the back by the exit, the main doors opened. Agent Parker and another man in a dark suit slipped in almost unnoticed. Parker caught my eye across the gymnasium. She gave me one sharp nod. It was time. My heart was a trapped bird. I stood up from the bleachers. I walked down the steps, my shoes echoing in the sudden quiet as people noticed me. I walked right past the stage to the second microphone, the one meant for community questions. Dylan and Tom stared at me, their smiles frozen. Leah, my father said, his voice a warning. I gripped the mic, my knuckles white. My name is Leah Monroe, I said, my voice shaking but carrying through every speaker. And I am one of those rumors. I turned to the town. There is a $48 and $500 loan in my name, a loan I never signed. There are investor statements being circulated. I looked right at Mrs. Green, who was sitting in the front row, with my name forged on them as a financial advisor. I never authorized that. A massive screen was set up behind my father. I pulled a USB from my pocket and walked to the laptop, plugging it in. This is the loan agreement, I said, as the redacted document flashed onto the screen. And this is the evidence of the misused funds, showing money from community investors being moved to other accounts. The gym was dead silent. A rising murmur of shock and disbelief began to build. Mrs. Green stood up, her hand trembling. Tom, she called out, her voice thin. Tom, is Leah telling the truth? My father grabbed the mic, his face purple. This is a misunderstanding, he boomed. A simple miscommunication, accounting errors. Leah she's overwrought. She doesn't understand the complexities. That's enough. Agent Parker's voice cut through the chaos like a knife. She was walking down the center aisle, her badge visible. Ma'am, I'm Agent Parker with the State Attorney General's office. She stepped up onto the stage, taking the mic from my father's stunned hand. As of this evening, the state is opening a formal criminal investigation into the Ridge Renewal Project Monroe Home Supply and its principal operators for multiple counts of fraud and financial crimes. She turned to the man in the suit who handed her a set of folded documents. She handed one to my father and one to Dylan. Mr. Tom Monroe, Mr. Dylan Monroe, You are being served with search and seizure warrants effective immediately." The gym exploded, shouting, sobbing accusations flying. Dylan looked at the paper, then at the exit, his face pale with panic. He took a step to walk off stage. My father, his face a mask of absolute fury, grabbed his arm in a vice grip. He turned his head, his eyes finding mine across the stage. The love, the community, the pride, it was all gone. All that was left was a burning, bottomless hatred. He spat the words, his voice low, but I heard them clear as a bell. "You just destroyed this family, Leah. Are you proud of yourself?" My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would break through my chest. I locked eyes with him, and I didn't answer. The days that followed the town hall meeting were a blur of ugly, echoing silence. The chaos of that night solidified into a new harsh reality for Haven Ridge. The local paper, hesitant at first, finally ran the headline. Everyone was whispering about Ridge renewal under investigation. State alleges fraud. It was real. Monroe Home Supply, the anchor of Main Street for 50 years, didn't open the next day. A legal notice was taped to the glass door, its official seals glinting in the morning sun, announcing that the premises and records had been seized by the state. The town fractured. Haven Ridge, built on neighborly trust, was now a town of whispers and drawn curtains. When I walked into the diner for coffee, an act of sheer stupid habit, the conversations didn't just quiet, they stopped. Dead. People I had known my entire life, people who had watched me grow up, either stared down into their plates or offered me a look of such profound, pitying sadness that it felt worse than anger. I turned around and walked out. I was a ghost in my own town. The social execution was swift. My personal losses were immediate and absolute. My mother left the first voicemail. It wasn't sad. It was venomous. She was sobbing, but it was a wail of rage, not grief. "You did this," she hissed through the tears. "You humiliated us. You think you're so righteous. You just killed your brother's future, Leah. You killed him. I hope you're happy. I hope you are so happy." I deleted it. An hour later, a text came through from my father. It was short, cold, and final. "You are no daughter of mine." And that was it. The family I had spent my entire life trying to please, the family I had tried to protect even from themselves, was gone. They had been erased, and I was the one holding the eraser. The community response was a confusing, painful mirror of the town's divided soul. One afternoon in the grocery store, I rounded the corner into the canned goods aisle and almost ran right into Sarah Jenkins, my mother's closest friend. She saw me, her eyes went wide with something like fear, and she physically grabbed her cart, turned, and wheeled it rapidly in the other direction. She didn't just ignore me, she fled. But later that same day, as I was leaving, a young couple I barely knew, maybe a few years older than me, approached me in the parking lot. The woman looked like she was about to cry. Leah Monroe," she asked. I braced myself. We wanted to thank you," the husband said, his voice low. "My parents, they were about to go all in. That's what my dad said. They were going to liquidate his retirement fund to invest with your father." The woman nodded, wiping her eye. "You saved them. You saved everything for them. We had to thank you." I drove home, my head spinning, feeling like both a hero and a traitor, and not knowing which one was true. Agent Parker kept me updated with clinical efficiency. The investigation was moving fast. Dylan was formally charged with multiple counts of wire fraud, securities, fraud, and theft. My father was under investigation for conspiracy and failure to report his cooperation, the only thing keeping him from immediate charges. Then the call came from a number I didn't recognize. A slick, smooth voice. "Ms. Monroe, my name is Alan Hayes. I represent your brother, Dylan." He was all practiced sympathy. He talked about family misunderstandings and Dylan's severe problems. Then he got to the point. "Dylan is looking at serious time, Leah. But if you were to sign a statement, one that perhaps minimizes his active role, frames him as more of a victim of these outside influences he fell in with, it would go a long way with the prosecutor. He wanted me to lie. After everything, after all this, he wanted me to go back to being the fixer to clean up the mess. No, I said. Ms. Monroe, I urge you. No. I hung up the phone. I started therapy. Marisol insisted. She drove me to the next town over to an office where no one would recognize my name. I sat on a comfortable beige sofa and wrestled with it all. The crushing, suffocating guilt over destroying my family's public image. The white-hot, furious anger that they had put me in a position where I was the only one who could. I wrestled with the anxiety that in my parents' eyes, I would always be the villain. Could I have done it differently? I asked the therapist, my voice small. Could I have warned them, tried to fix it quietly? The therapist, a kind woman with tired eyes, just looked at me. Did they give you that option, Leah? Or did they lie to you until you had no options left? One evening, about a month after the town hall, I came home from work exhausted. There was an envelope on my doorstep. No stamp, no return address. Just my name, Leah, scribbled on the front. I took it inside my hands unsteady. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper torn from a spiral. The handwriting was messy, rushed. It was from Dylan, mailed from the county jail. My breath caught. You were always the favorite, even when they pretended you weren't. You were the smart one, the good one. You won. I hope you're happy. I felt the familiar sting of tears, the old guilt rising. I had won. But what had I lost? I started to fold the letter to put it away when I saw it. A last line scribbled at the very bottom, almost an afterthought, like he wasn't sure he should write it. They didn't tell you everything about Dad's health, did they? I sat on my couch, the letter shaking in my hands. What did that mean? What else didn't I know? Dylan's scribbled note about Dad's health sent a jolt of cold, familiar dread through me. It was the old pattern, Dylan dropping a grenade and walking away. I didn't call my mother. I didn't trust her not to use it as manipulation. I called the one person who would give me the unvarnished truth, Agent Parker. She was hesitant, citing privacy, but I pushed. Is he sick? Is that what this is? I need to know if I'm operating on all the facts. She sighed, a rare breach of her professional calm. He's not sick, in the way Dylan implies, Leah. But during the initial seizure of the store records, your father suffered what the paramedics called a stress-induced cardiac event, a mild heart incident. He's stable, but he's on strict medical orders. He's not a well man. She paused. It's also why the prosecutor is considering a deal for him. Full cooperation, full restitution, in exchange for avoiding prison time given his age and health. A heart incident. It didn't excuse anything. It didn't erase the fraud or the lies. But it humanized him. The invincible pillar of the community was a scared, deeply flawed man whose body was breaking under the weight of his own choices. The anger I had been nursing, that cold, hard shield, cracked just a little. He wasn't just a villain. He was just my father. I arranged a visit. Not at their home, the home I grew up in, which I knew from Agent Parker was part of the asset seizure, but at the small, grim rental duplex they now occupied on the far edge of town. The change was a physical shock. The Grand Colonial was gone. In its place was a 2-bedroom unit with beige vinyl siding. When my mother opened the door, she looked small. The perfectly coiffed hostess was gone, replaced by a woman with tired eyes and uncombed hair. The living room was a graveyard of their former life. Cardboard boxes were stacked against the walls, labeled in my father's neat print. The community awards, the framed photos with the mayor, the symbols of their status, all gone. All that was left was the rented furniture. My father was at the small dining table staring into a cup of coffee. He looked 20 years older. The initial conversation was awful. It was frosty, brittle, filled with the ghosts of 1,000 unspoken accusations. My mother tried to ask about my job. I gave one-word answers. Finally, I couldn't take the pretense. I sat down at the table across from my father. "You hurt me," I said, my voice quiet but shaking. "You used me, and you lied to me, and you lied to this entire town." I laid out in calm, excruciating detail exactly what they had done to me. Not just the money. I talked about my credit score, the dream of my house vanishing. I talked about Mrs. Green, the look on her face. I talked about Sarah Jenkins fleeing from me in the grocery store. "You didn't just steal my money and my signature," I told them. "You stole my name, my reputation, the one thing I had built for myself separate from this family. You used it to rob our neighbors." My father just stared at the table. My mother started to cry, the quiet, manipulative tears I knew so well. "Leah, your father, his heart. I know about his heart." I cut her off, my voice sharp. "I'm not talking about his heart. I'm talking about his choices." Tom Monroe finally looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, not with anger, but with a profound, hollowed-out shame. I was terrified," he whispered. "Terrified of losing the store, of being seen as a failure. After 50 years, I was the man who couldn't keep the doors open. I thought Dylan's project, just one big win, it would fix everything. I pushed him. I knew I was pushing him." He looked at me, his gaze unflinching for the first time. "And I used you. I used your reliability, your goodness. I used it as a safety net for him. I took it for granted. I took you for granted." I turned to my mother. "And you let him. You told me I was overreacting. You told me I was hurting the family. You tried to guilt me into silence." Ellen's quiet weeping turned into a raw, ugly sob. "I was scared," she cried. "I was scared of losing our status, of being the woman people pitied at church. I didn't know how to be anyone else but Tom Monroe's wife. I chose the picture of a family over the real one. I chose the boat, and I didn't care who I threw overboard to keep it from rocking." The raw honesty of it silenced the room. After a long moment, Tom, humbled and broken, spoke. "The prosecutor. They're offering a deal. Restitution. Community repair. No prison because of my health. But Dylan, they're not so easy on Dylan." He leaned forward, his hands trembling. "They want me to cooperate fully. And they want a victim impact statement. From you." He finally said it. The hard ask. If you would speak to the prosecutor, Leah. Not to lie. Just to support a plea deal that focuses on restitution, on fixing what we broke, not just maximum prison time." I was torn. A dark, ugly part of me wanted them to suffer fully. I wanted Dylan to pay for every sleepless night, for every whispered rumor. But another part of me, the analyst, saw an opportunity for real accountability, not just destruction. "I'll think about it," I said. My voice was cold. "But there are conditions. For me. For any chance of this." They both looked at me, desperate. "If I do this, you will publicly apologize to the community. No spin, no misunderstandings. You will tell them you lied and you stole. You will participate in every single step of the victim restitution program, and you will cooperate fully with the state, no matter what it costs you. And you," I said, looking at both of them, "will stop. You will stop portraying me as the villain. You will stop telling people I destroyed this family. You did. If you want me in your lives in any way from this moment on, it has to be based on truth, not image. No more lies." My mother was sobbing too hard to speak. My father just nodded, his face ashen. He took a ragged breath. He looked me straight in the eye and his voice broke. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "Leah, I am sorry. For what I did. For who I made you be. For making you be the strong one. The responsible one. I'm so sorry." I felt decades of craving those words, of needing that one simple admission crash into me all at once. The good daughter inside me wanted to cry, to forgive, to run over and hug him, but the woman who had stood in that gym held back. I didn't know if it was enough. I didn't know if it could ever be enough. But it was a crack in the wall. It's been a year. Haven Ridge looks different, and so do I. The old Monroe Home Supply building still anchors Main Street, but the familiar red sign is gone. In its place, a simple painted wooden sign reads, Haven Ridge Community Commons. The building seized by the state and bought by a transparent nonprofit has been reborn. Where aisles of hardware and fertilizer once stood there are now rows of computers for a public library, a co-working space for local startups, and a bright, airy community center. I have a new role too. I got my CFE certification. I'm a certified fraud examiner, and I run my own small financial counseling practice out of an office in that very building. I spend my days helping locals, the same people who once whispered about me, spot scams, rebuild their finances, and navigate the complexities of credit. My own credit, once shattered, is restored. Last month, I quietly closed on that little Cape Cod by the park. It's mine. The scales of justice, it turns out, are slow, but they are thorough. Dylan took a plea deal. The state went hard on him for the fraud, but my impact statement focusing on his addiction helped. He got 5 years probation, mandatory gambling addiction treatment, financial literacy classes, and 2,000 hours of community service. He works part-time for a local construction crew, now doing manual labor, slowly repaying his share of the restitution fund. He's thin, quiet, and for the first time in his life, he looks tired. My father avoided prison. His age, his cooperation, and his failing health convinced the judge. But he lost everything else. The store, their house, his reputation, and nearly all of their assets. He and my mother still live in that small rental on the edge of town. Today is the official ribbon cutting for the community commons. The whole town is here. I'm on the board of the new, legitimate Haven Ridge Renewal Fund, alongside Marisol, Mrs. Green's sharp-as-a-tack nephew, and our local pastor. All our finances are public record. All our meetings are open. My integrity, the very thing my family almost destroyed, is now the cornerstone of the town's new trust. I see my father standing near the back. He's volunteering at the new tool library in the center's basement, humbly teaching basic home repair skills to young families. A few locals approach him, and I see him introduce me. I'm too far to hear, but I know what he says. He's said it before. He doesn't introduce me as my daughter who ruined us. He points to me with a look of complicated, weary pride and says, That's Leah. She's the one who had the guts to tell the truth when I didn't. My mother is here too. She's not at the front schmoozing with the town council. She's at a fold-out table quietly pouring coffee for the volunteers. She's no longer the queen of the church committee. She's just Ellen. Someone learning how to serve without needing to be seen. Later, I step outside for a breath of air, and Dylan is there leaning against the brick wall smoking a cigarette. We haven't spoken much. It's always tense. It looks good, he says, gesturing with his chin toward the building. It does. I agree. He takes a long drag, then drops the cigarette, grinding it out with his boot. I hated you for a long time, he says, not looking at me. I hated you for burning it all down. He finally turns his eyes clear for the first time I can remember. Then I was in treatment and I realized, you're the only reason I'm not dead, or buried so deep in debt and lies I'd never get out. You didn't burn it down, Leah. You stopped holding up the rotten beams. I nod, accepting it. The old conflict-avoidant Leah would have swept it away, said, It's okay. I don't. If you want to rebuild with me, Dylan, I say, my voice steady, it has to be slow, it has to be honest. No more shortcuts, ever. He looks at me, the ghost of his old charm flickering, but it's different. It's real. Yeah, he says. Okay, slow and honest. It's a fragile piece, but it's a start. I go back inside. The main hall is full. Kids are running past the shelves of donated books. On the bulletin board, a flyer advertises a free workshop, Financial Self-Defense, Protecting Your Assets from Scams. It's my workshop. I'm teaching it in 10 minutes. I look around the room. My family in different corners all changed. We are smaller, we are quieter, but we are more real than we have ever been. I walk toward the front. In my old life, I thought winning meant pleasing them, meant keeping the family image intact. I realize now I didn't win by destroying my family. I won by refusing to carry their lies. I won by reclaiming my own name. Not as Tom Monroe's good daughter, but as Leah Monroe, a woman who chose truth, who chose her community, and who chose her own moral compass over fear. I step up to the small podium. I glance out at the audience. My parents and Dylan are sitting in the back row. Our eyes meet. There are no masks. No banners. Just three tired, broken humans trying again. I take a breath, my hands steady on my notes. They broke my trust. I broke the silence. Now piece by piece we're rebuilding something new, something real. My name is Leah Monroe. I was the good daughter. Then I became the traitor. And somewhere between those two I finally became myself. Leah finally found her peace not by forgetting the betrayal, but by rebuilding something stronger in its place. What did you think of Leah's choice to show mercy? We read every single comment to hear your thoughts. If you enjoy stories about complex family dynamics and hard-won justice, be sure to subscribe. Thank you for listening. This has been a story from Radiance. We'll see you next time.